to throw again. Throws one over the middle. It's tipped, and it's intercepted. C.J. Mosley's got it. Runs right to the 10. 5. Touchdown. Jones has it taken away.
Bradley McDougal.
And he is in for a Jets touchdown. That's over the middle in the air. Picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone. Touchdown. There goes Darnold. And Bell. He's doing it all for the Jets.
And welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. I'm your host, Ben Blessington, with Michael Nania. You're listening to part 2 of our CYJ mailbag that kicks off training camp for the Jets in 2020. As always, you can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, iTunes, whatever. You can also find this podcast at jetsxfactor.com, which for my money is the best place to go for Jets content. Make sure you go check that out. So yeah, without further ado, we'll hop right into part 2. At Jets Gonna Jet, I like the at there. It says, if the Jets have another down year and somehow end up with the top 5 pick, how realistic is it that Sam will be the fall guy and Gase will get to pick the new QB, or do you think Gase won't make it that bad with that bad of a record? Definitely don't think that Gase will survive if it's a bad year. I can't imagine that Woody Johnson coming back, or even if Chris Johnson stays in charge of the team, is going to allow Gase to have 2. I mean, they finished 7-9, but 2 pretty bad seasons, especially if Darnold's bad. The argument that we were having, and I think this is the only question that kind of addresses it, but essentially, if the Jets decide to move on from Sam Darnold this year, and Joe Douglas says, let's package our pick with Seattle this year, so we have 2 first-round picks. If he takes the capital from the Jamal Adams trade and tries to move up and get a quarterback, which – given this trade, he has the flexibility to do. It gives him a lot of options. So let's say Sam Darnold and Gase both are terrible next year, and he wants to do that. The problem with that is you're just putting your new quarterback right in the same situation that Sam Darnold's been stuck in. He might have a better one because he has Joe Douglas doing the later rounds of the draft and free agency than Mike McCagnon, but you're putting him right in a position to fail. In my mind, if the season goes bad, I think Joe Douglas is, unless Sam Darnold's just horrific, I think Joe Douglas's plan is, if the season goes bad, you give Sam one more chance with a new head coach, offensive coordinator, perhaps a scheme that fits his strengths more. You use those picks to build up your offense, give him a better chance. And if he's bad, then you can use the picks from the 2022 draft that you got, because you have 2 in that round as well, to move up and get a quarterback if he's bad then. But I can't really see a way that Gase gets to stay and Sam goes. I think it's pretty much if they're bad, Gase goes, and Sam stays. If they're really bad, they both go. So Michael, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the only scenario I can see that playing out is in my nightmares. So hopefully that doesn't play out in real life. But I just don't see Gase being – the organization would have to have some real love for Adam Gase to make Sam – again, unless you said, like you said, Sam is just absolutely horrible this year, which seems extremely unlikely considering he hasn't been that so far with the worst help in the league. I don't see that happening at all. But I think, like we talked about earlier, these 2 guys are kind of connected. So if, Sam's not going to go after this year. It's only 3 years. He's 23 years old. But I think if Sam struggles, like you said, Gase will go. They'll give Sam another chance. And then after that, you could start thinking about looking for your next quarterback if he continues to struggle. But it's not even fun to talk about this. I mean, I still have such high hope for Sam Darnold.
Our listens have gone down.
You can read my 100 reasons about Sam Darnold. I think he's going to pan out. So I'm not worried about him being Gase's fall guy.
At Joe RB31, Joe Blewett, who runs the Jets Film Room podcast on JetX, you can check him out. He asked, which players on both sides of the ball were you both most wrong about, both being good versus bad and bad versus good? Michael, I'll throw this one to you since you've had way more cold takes than me.
Wow. Okay. But I'll be honest here. I think one that comes to mind is Robbie Anderson. Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess that's a good one. I remember last year being like, oh, how could you bring in competition for this guy? And then now here I am. I think he's a bum, but okay. I guess I can put that one on my resume. But Robbie Anderson, I think I kind of saw him having a breakout year this year, building off of that hot finish in 2019. Building off that hot finish in 2018. Didn't happen. He had intermittent flashes here and there, but couldn't build the consistency. And Anderson finishes his Jets career with 3 pretty similar seasons from 2017 through 19. 2017 was clearly ahead of those, but still all 3 of those seasons were about the same range. So he never really took that big leap. So I guess Robbie Anderson is the guy I probably had the biggest hopes for, who didn't really live up to it this year in 2019.
Yeah, I've been perfect every single take on this podcast. So at Sports if I had to, I think the biggest thing that I can be guilty of is being too much of a fan, and I think sometimes I can talk myself into somebody. So I'm trying to think of a specific example of that where I've been, I mean, like even Le'Veon Bell last year. Not saying Le'Veon Bell's bad, but I was pretty convinced that Le'Veon Bell was going to have a huge season last year, and not all of it's his fault, but was fairly bad. As far as guys, and I'll try to think of some others while I go through this. But as far as guys who are good when I thought they were going to be bad, there's not really many that stick out to me.
I think on the offensive line, I had higher hopes for them.
Right.
I thought Osemele, even Khalil, I thought was going to be okay.
Yeah, Khalil's a good one as well. I think for the most part,
I thought Brandon Shell was developing into a good tackle at one point.
Right. If for the most part, if I think a player on the Jets is bad, he's probably bad, because that would mean the evidence would have to be pretty overwhelming. I'm generally a pretty optimistic guy. I try to be measured. I try not to be a complete fan, but I try to be an optimist, because there's really no point to being a Jets fan if you're just constantly negative. But I guess, a guy like Foley Fatukasi or Nathan Shepard were guys that
Nathan Shepard is a guy for me. Yeah. After 2018, I was kind of I was pretty at least in turn. I don't know if I ever really said it on a podcast or tweet or anything, but at least personally, I was I thought he's extremely quiet in his rookie year. I didn't like what he did at all. But then this year he came out and was very solid in that second half of the season in terms of his pressure. So now I'm really excited about him going
right.
forward.
Yeah, I think those two guys, not necessarily, especially Foley. Like, I don't really think I was ever trash Foley Fatukasi. I actually mocked him to the Jets once. But he was a guy when we would do these podcasts and we do our 53-man roster predictions. Like, I probably didn't even have him on the roster in some of them. And the ones I did, he was just kind of a footnote. But yeah, pretty early on last year, I think it was the preseason actually against the Giants. It was like, oh, this guy actually can play. And then Nathan Shepard, when he came back from his suspension, he also performed really well in Greg Williams' defense. So those guys would be guys that I probably underrated, or specifically with Nathan Shepard, thought were just bad picks, and then turned out to be good. As far as good to bad, I probably had, overestimated guys before, like Le'Veon Bell's season last year. I was a big fan of Enunwa. I guess it was injuries kind of derailed his career, but I really loved Quincy Enunwa, and I was pretty bummed to see how his career's gone so far. I think I might have talked myself into Corey Vedvik, honestly, before the season. So, I don't know. We could do this all day. I would say, though, that Michael and I feel like we do have a fairly good track record. I don't feel like there's not any glaring ones. I'm sure I'm going to get added with some, but that stick out to me.
Everyone has. I'm sure everyone has the Cool Your Jets receipt saved. They just have all those
actually,
clips.
I do have a good one. I do have a good one. Not Jets, though. I thought DeShone Kizer was going to be. To be fair, I was pretty early on into looking at film. I was looking at a YouTube cut up or something and tweeting about it. I thought DeShone Kizer was going to be really good, and he turned out to be god awful. So that would probably be the biggest one, because I was pretty, and he had that great preseason. I was bragging about it on Twitter, and then then he was pretty terrible. I will say, though, Lamar Jackson, though, I do have tweets from the CYJ pod where I was calling him QB1. So, I think when the draft rankings came out, I had him at 3, but in the football season, I was quote tweeting big touchdowns he was throwing with QB1. So I'll take all the credit in the world for that.
I had a pretty hot take on, correct take on Lamar Jackson for the draft as well. I actually pulled it up right now. I think,
Jesus,
what did I say? I said if he could, it was something exactly what happened. If he gets a year to sit, he's going to be great. So there you go. I was correct about that.
I was definitely big on Lamar, but I think Josh Rosen's another guy. So, okay, now I'm starting to open up the floodgates. But this is pre-Cool Your Jets, and these are guys who weren't weren't on the Jets. This is the whole podcast used to run. But I would say DeShone Kizer and Josh Rosen would be the two QBs. I feel like I've also learned a lot since that about evaluating people. But DeShone Kizer and Josh Rosen are both quarterbacks where I thought they were going to be good, and they both have not panned out. Both been pretty massive busts.
Yeah,
so that
I was really high in Rosen too. I honestly preferred him I wanted either of him or Darnold when the Jets were on the clock, but
Right.
Rosen was my preference.
Right.
So
I
I'm
can't
not
even
afraid to
imagine-
say that.
I can't even imagine if they went with Rosen and put him behind this offensive line.
Yeah,
My God. Wouldn't be able to handle it. Joe Blewett, I'd love to know your answer to that, because I will say you've been very high, and this is not me shitting on Quinnen Williams. I'm just saying you were very high on Quinnen Williams. So part of the reason I'm still optimistic about him is purely because of how much you hyped him up pre-draft. So I'm hoping that all that film study you've done, it pays off.
I think Quinnen is breaking out this year. Check
I
out some of the
really
stuff
hope
I've
so.
done on him. His
All right.
pressure, he's doing a much better job last 4 games, and there's numbers to back it up.
I really, really hope Quinnen Williams is good, because that would help. That would help quite a bit, especially when Josh Allen and Oliver in a trade down were all options. Going with the guy who had like 2 unblocked sacks last year is not the best look. But look, most people saw him as the best player in the draft that year. So hopefully he breaks out this year. That'd be absolutely massive. At Sports Fiend, who actually has 3, he has one earlier, has this one, and then another one. What are your thoughts on no social media support for teammates for Jamal on his way to Seattle? Do you think he burned bridges with everyone in the locker room on his way out? I mean, we can't really speak to anything that in the locker room since we don't really know. I do think that was a good point that Kimberly Jones raised on NFL Network when she mentioned that, yeah, nobody had tweeted out publicly, wishing him well. I think he's probably good friends with Marcus May. If you look at their Instagram comments, Ashton Davis reached out to him. I guess he was never in the locker room with him. I would imagine he had some good friends with the people in the secondary. I think Brian Poole tweeted out it's always business or something, whatever. So no, I would say that he clearly has some friends in that locker room who texted him. I wouldn't read too much into it, but yeah, I do think as fans, we only see like maybe 25% of what a leader to the team is. We see who has the captain patch on. We see who's yelling loudly at practice. We see who calls himself a leader, but we don't really know what are they like in the locker room.
Yeah.
How do guys react, when they're in practice and there's this dude just screaming about how amazing he is and pounding his chest and screaming at you. Do players really like him and respect him? Do they think he's just an airhead? We don't really know a lot of that. So I would say don't read too much into it. I think it's a little interesting, but I would imagine that he still has his fair share of friends.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'm kind of in the middle on this. Is he because one of the things with Adams since the day he was drafted is that he's touted as this amazing, just franchise-changing leader. Is he that? I think all this shows that he's not that. The fact that he hasn't gotten this outpouring of support or anything like that. And there were even some players such as Bell coming out who are not afraid to voice their opinions against him. So I think we're clearly seeing, and even there was, I think it was the New York Post, I don't want to get it wrong, but there was an article that was kind of going with this point in which he wasn't that, some teammates were tired of his act and things like that. So is he that franchise-changing leader? Probably not. I don't think he's quite at that level, but does everyone hate him? Definitely not. He obviously has some friends on the team, and just because they're not coming out on Twitter and, because if they did come out on Twitter and support him, it would be like going against the team. But
right,
I'm sure a lot of players have, texted him, called him, things like that. But clearly he's not the amazing leader that he was touted as, but I don't think everyone hates him on the team.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Because it was such an ugly divorce, it would be seen as you're taking a side. If Sam Darnold was to put on Instagram a post of him and whatever, it would get attention, and it would just be like, he can text him personally or whatever. I'm not saying Sam and him are great friends or anything, but it's certainly an interesting scenario, but I'm glad, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, I'm just glad that is over. That even though I'm really happy with the compensation we got, and then I feel like we can just kind of enjoy this season. I mean, look, we still have Adam Gase to worry about, but I feel like we can enjoy the season a lot more without that drama. It's pretty much this year is not even necessarily about playoffs. Do I think they could sneak in? Maybe, but for me, it's like if the Jets go 7-9, but Sam Darnold throws 30 touchdowns and, under 15 picks, I'm feeling really good. That's what the season's about for me. It's the Sam Darnold show.
I'm with you on that. And I think another big thing that's important is that, whether or not they love or hate him, if Adams were in the locker room, it would be awkward. It would be something you really could not get around to win games. So just getting him out was very important.
Right. I'm still amazed that Joe Douglas got 2 firsts for him and a third and a very good replacement player for a guy that pretty much every NFL team knew was going to have to be shipped out. I think Joe Douglas just kept maintaining that leverage, saying, no, we're going to keep him, just so he didn't get any low ball offers like, fire sale, this guy has to go. And it worked. So, very, very excited about that. And, I don't really know about him in the locker room. But speaking of those picks, at SportsFiend, that's another one, at @sports_fiend, with a 3 instead of an E, by the way. What is your best case scenario with the selections we make next year for the 2021 NFL draft with our 2 first-rounders? Do you think we'll move up for a highly coveted prospect or just keep our picks to select for depth at key positions? I mean, again, too early to know. The next question we'll touch on a big subject about the college football season. We'll get to that topic in a minute. As far as how Joe Douglas will spend it, I wouldn't be surprised if he traded down with, especially if that Seahawks pick, you see a lot of trade downs from 25 to 32. I mean, you see trade downs all over the NFL draft, but it seems like there's always a trade down the back half of the draft. If the Seahawks have a good year, maybe they lose in the NFC Championship or something, and that's the 29th pick in the draft or something. The talent I mean, look, we'll get to that point in a minute, but the talent difference between people at the end of the first round and the beginning of the second isn't too much. So, maybe a team wants to hop another team and will give you their second and their third and a future pick, or I could totally see Joe Douglas moving back and turning that 1 first from Seattle into 3 players or something. That kind of seems to be his style. But yeah, I mean, if I can't really see them trading up, I mean, maybe it just doesn't really strike me as Joe Douglas' style. If a guy like Jamar Chase or somebody they really, really fall in love with at offensive line or receiver or something, an edge rusher falls and they're sitting at, let's say they've already made their pick and they were deciding between him and another guy. They go with one guy and this guy falls all the way to 16, 17, 18. Then maybe I could see the Jets hopping up using an extra pick and that Seattle pick to go get somebody. But I think I would probably put money. I'm not going to do the Manish Mehta, I'm going to walk home from the NFL draft or whatever he did when he said that John Edzik was going to trade one of those 12 picks. I'm not going to put that level of dedication into it, but I will say that I would probably bet that at least one of those 4 first-rounders the next 2 years is going to be a trade down. Michael, what say you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think a trade down is really his mentality. Like you said, there are always times where a player that a team really wants falls further than they thought they would, and then you jump on the opportunity. So that's always open. But I don't think trading up will be in his really what he'll be trying to do. But trading down, that definitely seems like the more Joe Douglas kind of thing to do. But in terms of positions, I think edge is clearly going to be the number 1 need next year. Just like this year, they attacked O-line really aggressively. I think edge is going to be that spot next year. They're really lacking there, unless Jabari Zuniga, and Zuniga could long-term be good, but as a 3rd-round rookie, probably won't show too much this year. So it's going to be a huge need, as it has been for 15 years, but I think this will be the opportunity to finally address that. So I think that could be the position they look at. Guard is going to be a big need, and latter half of the first round is when you really see interior offensive line start to come on the board. That's really the hot spot for it. So I think edge and guard will be the top positions, but wide receiver and corner right up there as well.
Right. I think the picks are going to go to building around Sam and definitely getting after the quarterback. Joe Douglas knows that to win in the league, in the National Football League, you have to protect your quarterback and get after the other quarterback. And he pretty much targeted one of those things this offseason. He didn't really have much room to operate with the other one because the offensive line situation was so dire. So he spent this offseason really trying to rebuild that offensive line. Next offseason, I imagine that you look at all the top teams, they all have top-tier pass rushers. I mean, the Niners especially. I mean, you look at that front seven, it's scary. I think next season he's going to start to try to build that more. I do like Zuniga a lot, and we'll see if Quinnen can, keep developing and whatnot. But yeah, next season I think they'll add to the front seven and then keep going with their building the offensive line. And I think you made a really good point there. Unless Russell Wilson gets hurt, the Seahawks are probably going to be in the playoffs, so that pick is probably going to be in the 20s. I'm going to just be cheering for an early exit because if that pick's around that 22 spot, there's always very good guards and interior offensive linemen that go there. Cesar Ruiz was the one this year. And it's really, if he was a left tackle with the same production he had, he would have been a top 10 pick. But yeah, interior offensive linemen aren't seen as important. So if, let's say the Jets, for argument's sake, let's say the Jets go 6-10 or whatever and picking 10, a good edge rusher falls to them, they take him at 10, and then the Seahawks pick is 22. They can take one of the top interior offensive linemen. I mean, that would be a home run first. I mean, just positional value alone, and who knows what situation it'll be like next year. But if he can walk away from that first round with the, getting after the quarterback and protecting it, I think that'll be his MO. And, maybe a receiver, but, I think there are some good ones in free agency, and he can always attack them in the later rounds. At Gray2820 asked a very similar question, but another perspective on it. He said, how do you guys think JD will continue to build the roster with 5 picks in the top 100 in the next year's draft? And how do you think the draft will be affected if there's no college football? So this is probably the part of the question we should talk about a little bit more, because we already talked about getting after the quarterback, protecting Sam, and giving Sam weapons, and maybe a corner is how he's going to use those top 5 picks, or those 5 picks. Yeah, I mean, Michael, what are your thoughts? Because we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. If there's no college football season, do we think a lot of guys stay in college? Or some, maybe there is a college football season and some guys opt out. Does that cause them to slide down in the first? Guys who, if they played, would have been at the higher end of the draft. Maybe they fall to the later end of the first round just because they didn't play this year. There's a lot of questions, and I think that is a bonus for Seattle, was especially this 2021 pick. There's so many questions in the air. So Michael, just your overall thoughts on how, I mean, obviously nobody can predict it, but how do you expect, I guess, the draft to be affected with college football, and how do you think that impacts Joe Douglas?
Well, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind with any discussion like this right now is just how unpredictable it is, how many things could change, how quickly they can change. So it's just really tough to project until we know how the NCAA and all of college football plans to handle this situation. But I think you really could see maybe a weaker class if, maybe the season gets, even if not canceled, maybe it gets postponed, players opt out, and they want to play their next year, and they don't go into the draft. You could maybe see a weaker overall talent pool. There are just a lot of ways it could go. The draft could get pushed back, and that could change the entire flow of the offseason, kind of cram everything into the latter half. Maybe the draft gets pushed back to June, July, but this is all just speculation. I have no idea really what to predict right now. There are so many different ways it could go, but it's going to have I think the likelihood of it being the same as it has been and not drastically altered seems pretty low. I think there's definitely going to be something majorly different. If not one thing, right, everything. It's going to be a lot different, I think, most likely, unless somehow they're able to get this college season on track and played as normal. But if not, there are going to be huge effects, and I think it really will affect the amount of talent that you're getting in that draft class.
Yeah, and the thing to remember as well is that every single front office in the NFL will be dealing with the exact same set of circumstances. So the best front offices, the most resourceful front offices, those are the ones that are going to win out. So it's not necessarily that the Jets are at a disadvantage than any other team, but there's going to be teams that take advantage of this whole situation, not just the draft. And Joe Douglas's and Adam Gase's job is to take advantage of that. At Earth to Adam, or at Earth_2_Adam. I assume he's probably talking about Adam Gase in all caps. First, maybe should I yell at Michael? Okay, no, I think I'll save our listeners' ears.
Yeah, maybe you should spare us that, but yeah. It would be funny though. But this is all caps. Just imagine that.
First time, long time. Is it more likely we flip some of the picks we got in return for Jamal Adams to maybe get a premium pass rusher like Yannick Ngakoue, like Manish Mehta talked about today in an article, or the Jets signed free agent Jadeveon Clowney, then in parentheses in lowercase, who said, come get him, close parentheses, back to uppercase, and use those picks to bolster the O-line? Which would you rather see? Earth Adam, I love your enthusiasm, and I actually do think this is a great question because I saw you tweeting about it and other people were talking about it. When it comes to Yannick Ngakoue, look, I like him a lot. He's young. He's a pass rusher. You see the best teams do this where they, will ship off some picks to get a proven pass rusher, add him to your front seven, and, you see immediate success. You saw it with D Ford last year and others. The thing with him is that the Jets won't be able to sign him to an extension. So you'd be sending, let's say, some people are talking about sending a first. If it was for a second, I would do this maybe. But I'm not doing this for a first, especially for what we're about to talk about. Let's say this Jets sent over a second, though. So they sent over a second for Yannick Ngakoue. He's now on the team. He can't be signed to an extension until after the season, I believe, because I think he's on the franchise tag. I should be more well-versed in this. But essentially, you're paying draft capital to a guy who doesn't want to be there. So, no, I would not offer a first. I'm not John Schneider. And you're getting a guy who is essentially on a rental, similar to what the Giants did with Leonard Williams. The only benefit you get to that is that he's on your team now, so you get 1 year of him. But the Jets aren't Super Bowl contenders this year. And you get dibs to sign him. But, who knows how the season goes. Let's say the Jets have a bad season and Adam Gase gets fired and Yannick wants an insane contract and Joe Douglas just penny pinching him and whatnot. Then he doesn't resign and you lost draft capital. So I don't really see Joe Douglas doing it. If the Jets were, 2 or 3 years down the line from this rebuild that they're in, maybe they're coming off a few playoff appearances and their pass rush needs a boost, I would probably send it over and trust that I could get a deal done with him. But no, I would not trade for Yannick. Michael, your thoughts on that? Also in signing Jadeveon Clowney. And then we can get to the second half of the question in a bit.
Yeah, I think to get to the part of Glizzy McGuire's question comparing Ngakoue to Jadeveon Clowney.
What a name.
It's 10 out of 10.
Can we also acknowledge that not only is it Glizzy McGuire, not only is it all caps, he also has a pineapple and a pizza emoji. So clearly a man of taste and a Mark Asno gift. 10 out of 10.
A man of culture for sure.
I got to make sure I'm following him. Yeah, I am. Okay, so good. Please make sure you submit always to this mailbag.
Yeah, really good question though. But about Clowney and Ngakoue, I think the biggest thing comparing those two guys right now is that Clowney's a free agent right now. And if you're the Jets and you can get Clowney to settle for a 1 year prove-it deal, say 1 year, $10 million, just throw that his way, that's a good deal for the Jets. He's a big upgrade for you right now. You don't have to commit long-term or trade the draft capital that you would for Ngakoue. So in a vacuum, I'd prefer Ngakoue because these two guys are similar players. They're both really good in one phase and just okay in the other. Clowney is an amazing run defender and a pretty good pass rusher, and Ngakoue is a really good pass rusher, and just okay in run defense. So I'd prefer the pass rusher. But considering that you can get Clowney, if Clowney's willing to do that, if you could get Clowney to settle for a 1 year deal, it definitely makes a lot more sense for the Jets to do that than to trade picks for Ngakoue. So if they would be willing to go after Clowney, I think that makes a lot of sense for them now. I was really against, and still am, them really signing Clowney to a long-term deal just because of his pass rushing not being that great. But if you can get him on a 1 year deal, especially needing run defense a little bit more with Jamal Adams having left, and his pass rushing is still a big upgrade over what they have on the edge, even though he's not fantastic. I think Clowney makes sense for them right now. I don't think they're going to go after it. It just doesn't seem like they've had that interest. But in terms of comparing those two guys, I think Ngakoue is a more valuable player, but to get Clowney, just signing him without giving up draft capital makes a lot more sense for them.
Yeah, Bradley McDougald tweeting about his former teammate is one thing. Jadeveon Clowney's also saying, come get me. So, that can mean, come pay me $20 million, Joe Douglas, come and pay me for my services. He's also said he wants to play for contender, so I doubt he's taking a discount. Unless he desperately wants to be in New York, he's getting extremely lowballed by everybody else. He loves Greg Williams' system or something and just wants to play here for 1 year. In that circumstance, maybe I could see Joe Douglas trying to give him, 1 year, $15 million contract or $14 million, something like that. But I believe that the cap space that they have right now carries over to next offseason. And with all the uncertainty going around with what the salary cap is going to look like next year, the Jets are actually in fairly good shape compared to the rest of the league. I do wonder, because there's all those reports about the Johnsons penny pinching, how much of that was just, whether it was Woody being the ambassador to the UK or just the fact that this was, the free agency was in March. Maybe it was just an awareness by the organization that, COVID was serious and was going to impact the next season, and they didn't know what the salary cap was going to look like. I don't know. Maybe that seems maybe too smart for the Jets. But potentially that was the reason why they penny pinched and wanted to save every single dollar they could. And then they also offered a lot of 1 year deals because, look, free agents next year are going to get lowballed because they're all going to be on 1 year deals. It's all going to be less money than they had been making. So it made a lot of sense to sign a lot of 1 year deals, and then you can replace him with even cheaper talent the year after that. I don't know if that was the Jets' idea, but anyways, my point to this is if you don't sign Jadeveon Clowney, more cash carries over to next year. Again, the Jets are not in a win now situation. I probably wouldn't do it. I agree with you that they need help with the run defense, but with Mosley and Williamson coming back, I think that's going to be a big deal. And Bradley McDougall's no slouch. So unless you're really confident you can sign Yannick Ngakoue to a long-term deal and you're not giving up a first, maybe Jadeveon Clowney, for the reasons I just outlined, probably not. And then he said, would you rather see them use these picks to bolster the O-line? Yes. I mean, and edge and corner and receiver and whatnot. But I think certainly at least one of those picks is going to go to O-line. Yeah, I mean, I think they can build out the front seven next offseason. It doesn't all need to be in one offseason. At Sammy D _ but thank you, Glizzy. At Sammy T _ season. So again, another Clowney question. So Clowney clearly showed that he was willing to come and play for Gang Green, but do you think Stone Cold Douglas will pull the trigger and sign him? Well, we just kind of answered that question, but no, I don't think he will. Michael, anything else to add on the Clowney situation?
Yeah, I think that's a great point you made about the cap space, wanting to carry some of that over. So I don't think they're going to go after either of these edge rushers. I think Clowney makes sense for them, but there really has not been any sign that it's something that they're willing to pursue. And I think there's sense to it in terms of the point you brought up with the cap space. So I don't see I don't see them pursuing Clowney.
And that will wrap up part 2 of our training camp kickoff mailbag. You can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes, Spotify. You can also follow us on Twitter at CYJPod. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania. And as always, you can find us at jetsxfactor.com, which is the best place to go for Jets content. Make sure you check it out. There's a few new rookie shirts that I thought were pretty cool designed. A few were designed by Michael himself. So make sure you just check it out at jetsxfactor.com. Part 3 will be available Tuesday morning, as this will be coming out Sunday morning. And then we should have more content later in the week. And we're just looking forward to having content all the time here at CYJ Pod. So stay tuned. Hope everybody's doing well, and go Jets.
Back to throw again. Throws one over the middle. It's tipped and it's intercepted. C.J. Mosley's got it. Runs right to the 10. 5. Touchdown. Jones has a taken away.
Bradley McDougald